Welcome to the Revit tutorial of parametric families, creating your own parametric based family via pattern type. So we're going to start a new project first before we get into families. So we're going to go ahead to the Massing and Site tab, click In Place Mass. We're just going to keep it a typical mass 1. We're just going to create a basic mass from a spline here. So go ahead and create something to your liking. Again, clicking and then hitting escape to get out. And then we're actually going to go to level 2 and create a similar line, but we're just going to do a little bit differently so that Revit has a little bit more fun trying to create this. So then if we create a 3D view, we're going to click both of these, and we're going to click Create Form, because you don't typically, unless you're in a family editor of a component, Revit knows that you want a lofted surface between these two. So go ahead, Create Form, and you can see that I've created this surface between those two lines. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to finish the mass. And it'll give you a warning there. So if we minimize this, and exit out of these other views, now we're going to go to the big R, click New. We didn't want to open a project, so we're going to close that out. We're going to go to New Family. And we're going to do pattern-based, generic model pattern-based. I'm going to open that. So as you can see, Revit gives you these basic geometry with 4 reference points and 4 reference lines. So now if you click on this, you can see it gives you a whole bunch of different work planes to choose from. If you click on this grid outside, you can actually change the type of generic pattern that it gives you. So if you click triangle, it'll give you a basic triangle. And this all relates to that mass. So again, if you, depending on what you want your basic geometry of your parametric family to look like, we're just going to stick to a square for now. So typically what I've found is you need these reference points in order to stay connected to your other family components once you place this within the editor. So if we go ahead, we're going to actually use this form already. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set our work plane to this work plane just by clicking Set, hovering over it, tabbing until we get to the work plane that we want, and we're going to do this vertical work plane. So I set it to that. Then we're going to click on the rectangle. We're just going to create a basic rectangle. And now if we click the rectangle and this line, we're going to create form, and it's going to create that rectangle entirely around. So Revit only has a create form tool, and it knows if you click a path and like a sketch, it knows that you want to create it entirely along that. So now that these reference points are along this, it's going to create and connect this component to itself. So we're going to go ahead and minimize this family. We're going to open up the mass that we had before. If we click the mass, we want to edit it. We're going to click the mass again, and we want to make sure to divide the surface. So if we click divide the surface, it's going to give us this typical pattern. But we want to make sure that this matches up with our family. So we're going to click rectangle. So now it knows that you want a rectangle division on your face. So now if we finish the mask for now and go back to our family, we're going to load this into our project by clicking that Load into Project button. Click on the mask, edit it in place again, and now we're going to see that if we click the rectangle, it gives us the option of Family 1. So if we click Family 1, Revit's going to think, it's going to try and figure out how to connect all of your pieces. Now I made this I made this mass a little bit complicated, so it's giving me an issue. But you saw for a second there, it popped up and allowed me to create it. So we're just going to do actually a little bit simpler mass real quick for you. Create another one. We're just going to simply extrude this for right now. Create form and extrusion, and again you can now divide the surface, and we're going to pick that Family 1 again. You can see it's created and it's attached itself based on that, so it's filled the gaps because of the reference points. So now some of you are going to ask, what about if I have a more complicated pattern other than this? Typically from what I've found is you need to have these reference points. So an easy way is to copy and paste them. So depending on where your reference points are on the pattern in relation to other points, that's what is going to require them to connect. So you can play around with that for now. Some of you know the typical space frame example that Revit has, and the space frame works in that principle that all of the reference points are on the edge of the extrusion. So when you have that basic square shape that I just created, and then below it you have two extrusions, each end of that extrusion has a reference point. So the reference points know to line up to one another. So you can go ahead and play around with that to create different types of connected panels. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create one more. So we're going to set our reference plane to this line. This time we're going to create a circular. Set this. We're going to go ahead and click all this and our circle, and then we're actually gonna move well, I thought we were going to move this, but we're not. All right, we're gonna keep this here. And we're going to go back to our mesh, edit in place. We're going to change this to triangle bent. So as you can see, it has now broken up the surfaces. We're going to go back to our family, load into project, and we're going to overwrite it. Click on our surface again, and we're going to click Family 1, and Revit again is going to calculate how to create this panel. And as you can see, it's given us more issues this time. because of those reference points. So when you're creating your parametric family components, you want to make sure that the reference points are lining up perfectly. So I'm just actually gonna play around right now in the tutorial real quick, and we're gonna see if we can change this to a flat triangle and see if this actually helps us out at all. So we're gonna load this again, overwrite it. We're again gonna and as you can see now, it's even worse than it was before, because the beginning mesh didn't allow us to create the correct pattern. So you want to make sure you use the right pattern for what you're trying to accomplish. I think that's one of the main points that people forget, that they, because you're using a different pattern, it's going to try and connect it in ways that you don't really want to connect it. So based on your form, you want to make sure you use the correct geometry pattern, and you also want to make sure you know where those reference points are, and you have them at the edges of your pieces. And if we go back to the square example, you want to make sure that you have those reference points not only here, but also on the other edges of your extrusion. So now if we click all of this and create form, we can create this extrusion and match it to these. So now all of these points know that they want to reference each other. So if we load this, yes, I'm going to overwrite the existing version. See, because we have the wrong type of pattern loaded. Sorry. Let's finish this mass. If we load the correct pattern first, you can see that it now attaches itself. The ends attach themselves. So there's just some quick thoughts about pattern-based parametrics. If you have specific questions, feel free to come and find me, and we can play around and hopefully figure out how to get your individual things to work. All right.